Okay, so welcome to Cooking for a Siege. Oh, come on. I'm going to stop doing other stuff and just do this. This class is from 2 points of view. One is running a siege contest, and the other is entering a siege contest. So, and having your best possible chance to win. So we're going to start with running it because a lot of the things that go into running it help you figure out how to win it. First off, when I do a siege cooking contest, it means exactly that. You are the cook of an army that is besieging a castle in a rural area. You've been there for months. You've run out of all the food you brought with you, and you're sending the foragers out to go scour the countryside for anything edible they can grab. But tomorrow, your lord is arriving to inspect the progress of the siege, and you will have a feast for him, won't you? So you send the foragers out one more time, and anything they find, no matter how weird, is going on that table somewhere. How this works in actual when you're actually running a contest is you choose a time and a place that is pre-17th century Western Europe or adjacent cultures. At least that's the standard when I joined in AS7. And you research the food that was available there and then. For example, the food that was available in Spain before it became Al-Andalus is quite different from the food that was available in Renaissance Spain. And you have to find out what was available at the time and place you're choosing. You then have to choose a selection of foods that will make it possible for a good cook to make something that looks like a feast, which means you need at least one protein, at least one sweet, at least one sour, at least one kind of oil or grease, 2 vegetables, 2 fruits, and something weird. It's 9 to 10 items. Now, when I do it, I'm allergic to half the planet. So I actually started running siege cooking contests so that I could get food once a year that I knew wouldn't kill me. So I limit people to old world spices because I'm not allergic to old world spices, but I am allergic to tomatoes and all the capsicums. No fun. With my siege cooking contest, you may not add any other food. You may only add spices, salt, and water. That way, they're not going to smuggle in cucumbers and make me so sick that my eyes cross and I start swearing at half the world. And that's a good thing. By doing it this way, you level the playing field because everybody's getting exactly the same ingredients and they're not sneaking something that costs $1,000 an ounce in because it's a really important ingredient and I'd never do without it, but no one else who's competing could ever afford it. I don't think that's fair. And for another, if you have someone in the group that your judges will be coming from who has an allergy, you just don't give them any of that. Makes things so much simpler and so much safer. I have been in a group that the Baron and Baroness and 2 other families were all gluten intolerant. Wow. If I were running a siege contest for them, just sorry, I had to get my son something critical because he's leaving. I do apologize. Anyway, if I were doing a siege cooking contest in that barony, obviously there would be no wheat, barley, rye, oats, spelt, kamut, emmer, triticale at all. But almost every time and place in our period, in our area of study, that you could choose would have some other form of starch beside one of those. For example, in most of Lower Europe, you could get Spain imported from the Middle East or from Persia. Cat, get down, I'm talking. So once you've got your main ingredients chosen, you then have to decide how much leeway you're going to give them. If you're working with novice cooks, I mean real beginners, tell them the time and place, because they are going to have to find recipes, either steal some cooking laurel and nail her sandals to the path of their camp until she tells them everything she knows, or go through the bookstore at the event with fire and sword, or burn up all the data everyone in camp has looking things up online. But it's not fair to not tell them if they're that green. If you're dealing with experienced cooks, it's better if you don't tell them, because they might pull a lovely surprise on you. I once provided a bunch of foods that were all available in Persia for one of my cooking contests. And one of the contestants came in with a full spread from Al-Andalus using only Moorish Spain recipes. And it was fantastic, but it had nothing to do with Persia. You want to give them the chance to pull a funny on you. The other thing that is important to remember about the foods you provide, I'm backtracking, is proportions. They have to have enough of the ingredients so that they can do a good feast. If you give them each one chicken leg, don't be surprised at what you get back. It won't be fun. But you also have to make it possible for them to skunk themselves if they get stupid. If they each get a quart bottle of vinegar and they decide they should put all that vinegar in the salad dressing, that's going to come out bad, and they'll deserve it. The cooking can be done several ways. Now, the best, if you have an event where the public are going to be around, is to have all the people cooking in a central place, to have 5 fire rings available for each of the 5 teams. And the people can come and watch. Oh, I have run, somebody asked how many siege competitions have I run. It's somewhere over 21, but I'm not exactly certain. Since I do it at Penzic and I'm a merchant and therefore find it very difficult to cook for myself, I do, when my son was young, because he had a hollow leg, it was 3 preliminary nights, and the winner of each, with 3 people competing each of the preliminary nights. And then the winner from each of the preliminary nights went head to head for the finals. Again, 3 contestants. Now that I'm cooking only for myself and another adult who does not gobble everything in sight faster than you can watch his fork move, I usually have 2 preliminary nights with 2 contestants and then the 2 finalists. That way I don't end up with more food than you could feed a galaxy. But if you are working at a place like Penzic, where having people watch while the cooking is being done is not a particularly important factor, I just let people take the food to their own camp, and they use whatever cooking equipment they have available in their own camp. Because the idea for me is to get food that, period food that I can eat and that won't make me sick, not to demand that everybody use only ceramic cooking vessels that were made by this one potter. That can be a great contest, but it's not the one I'm running. One advantage of having people do things in their camp is that they can get help from other camp members, which I have no problem with, And they can also get hindered by other camp members if they don't have the nerves to tell someone, no, you are not going to eat all the rice we just cooked. Yes, that did happen to a 13 and 15-year-old team that were one of my contestants. Obviously, they didn't win, but they came back next year and did. They had learned, and they got somebody they knew to just stand in front of the fire pit and say, you touch it, you die. When I do mine, since the point is to feed me and to feed a friend who is also gluten, casein intolerant with other fun stuff to add to it, like both of us cannot touch any alcohol in any level ever, I usually choose as my third judge someone with culinary experience. Often I use a friend who worked in a bakery for many years and who has been a cook for many years. Sometimes I manage to Shanghai a cooking model. If I announce on the internet in time, somebody will go, oh, I want to play, and come and be one of the judges, which is great because they can notice things that people who just like the taste might not notice. Now, when I do a contest, there's 5 categories, and there's a maximum of 10 possible points in each category. There's taste, of course, presentation, appearance. Those are not the same thing. How closely you match the period and how little you wasted. These are all important. Taste and appearance for different things are, presentation and appearance are different things. Presentation is how the food is brought to the table. We had some people who were given a pound chub of ground elk one year. And one team made it into something stewish and it tasted fabulous. But the other team made it into a meatloaf the shape of a deer's head. They didn't have enough to make an elk head, really. But they bought a set of antlers somewhere in the marketplace, and they carried it in on a platter with something to make eyes and a set of the antlers stuck carefully in place, wrapped in several layers of cloth, so that it looked like an actual deer, elk, something in that family head. And they addressed everybody in their whole barony and anything green they could beg, borrow, or steal. And they had ladies ahead of them with zills and dancing, and we return with the fruits of the hunt. And they had bows on the backs of the entire team of cooks, as if they had hunted the deer or the elk. They got 10 for presentation. We had another group, a different year, that managed to talk the king and queen of their kingdom into coming and presenting the food. Now, it was very impressive, but their historical accuracy, their keeping to one period, they got zeros because the king and queen would not do that unless I was an emperor, and I'm not, or empress, I suppose, but you get the idea. If the king and queen had come with the presenters, with the Kingdom Herald, to announce the king and queen of wherever wish to inform you of the prowess and the glory of their devoted cooks, etc., that would have gotten both presentation and historical accuracy, because that's something that a king and queen who are having a boring day might do just to rattle the cage of one of their higher level nobles, like a duke that was visiting them. So they were close, but the kind of close that makes things worse instead of better. Taste is not just the flavor. It's also the proportions of ingredients so that no one flavor is whomping you on the head, unless that's what's supposed to happen. If you give them a 2-pound bag of garlic, don't be too surprised if one of them's an Anglo-Saxon and comes back with a dish of boiled garlic reboiled in butter. Because that's a thing that could happen. But generally speaking, you want the spices to not be the star of the meat course. You want the meat to not be the star of the bread course, and so on. You want some balance there. But that does depend on where and when. Just after the Crusades, there were French recipes that used so freaking much spice that it would gag a maggot. Really revolting to modern tastes. Although I do have to point out that spices in the Middle Ages were taking 1 to 7 years to arrive in France from their origins in Southeast Asia. And they were not packed in steel cans in nitrogen atmosphere for that trip. They were in barrels and bags and boxes and worse. So if the recipe says that you need 20 peppercorns for a 10-serving batch of soup, 20 peppercorns, modern peppercorns, you're going to be choking unless you were raised on Mexican wedding food. But if you adapt down to account for the time and distance it took for the pepper to get to Europe, you're going to have a really tasty soup. The appearance is how the food looks on in dishes. The first year I did this, I had one guy who walked up to get his food. I give them 25 hours from the time they pick up their food to produce their meal, because that way I'm handing out the food for tomorrow before I have to judge the meal for today. It was simpler. And you could hand out the food on a Friday for a Saturday evening feast if you have a weekend event, and it would work great. But this guy, when he walked up to get his food, he said, "Tell everybody else to go home. I'm a professional chef." And we went, okay, and handed out the other 2 people's food anyway. The next day, he came back with 2 buckets. I'm not joking, actual tin buckets, like old-time beach buckets for children, and put them out over the table and went, "Here, eat." That was the best glop I ever threw a lip over. But it was glop. He got 0 points on presentation. He got 0 points on appearance. And he was so unbelievably furious when he didn't win. But he knew the list of requirements. Everybody did. And he ignored 2 of them. Actually 3, because the historical accuracy was also so not there. So appearance and presentation count. They count for a lot, because in the Middle Ages, by the end of winter, when all you've got left is carrots and dried peas and yet another boar that you've been hunting because you have to get out of the castle and die of throwing knives at your uncle, whatever. The cook had better be good at appearance and presentation, just in order to get you to not throw knives at him. So that has to be part of the points, the consideration for your score. Now, historical accuracy is where you can get skunked, because, as I said, you may hand out Persian food and get back a meal from Moorish Spain. You may hand out food from Scandinavia and get back a completely different dinner from the Shetland Isles, but they have the same climate and the same foods available. And you can't take points off on them for that, because they did what you told them. They produced a period meal, all from one time in one place, using the ingredients you give them. And it was the correct ingredients for the time and place that they chose recipes from. It just wasn't the one you thought up. I like that because that way I get surprises. And I do enjoy surprises as long as they're not, oh my God, I'll be at the doctor's in 15 minutes flat or I'll die. The last one, how little they waste. This was a side effect of something that happened my third or fourth year doing the Siege Cooking Contest at Penzic. Somebody came with a lovely spread, good appearance, good presentation, good historical accuracy, tasted great, but 2 ingredients had not been used at all. And I said, what happened to the lentils and the oil? And he said, I don't like lentils. No, that's not how this works. If you were really in a siege situation, you wouldn't care a damn whether you liked it or not. It's still food, and you don't have enough food to make a proper feast. And you're going to use anything they bring you back, from swans to hedgehogs. So how little they waste has proved for me to be an incredibly important point, because it keeps people from deciding to just dismiss an entire category of ingredients. One group, I don't remember if it was the same guy, but one group tried to use half the ingredients and feed the other half of the ingredients I gave them for my feast for their campmates, to bribe them into not complaining about their using the stove all day. I was less than thrilled. After that, I made sure that, the how little food did you waste had equal points with taste and presentation and all the others. And it stopped that sort of shenanigans happening, which was very important. And I think it's a good idea. Another part of presentation can be what they tell you about the food and how. If they tell you this recipe is from Al-Andalus and recite the original recipe and name the guy who wrote the book and so on, that's going to get them something. But the cookbook Al-Andalus was originally written for a specific audience, which included somebody very high up level noble. I can't remember anymore if it's a prince or a duke or what. But if instead of saying this is from the cookbook of Al-Andalus from the year 1290 to whatever, he says, this is a recipe that I got from the chef to the great. See the difference? Historical accuracy, because that's the way they would have done it. One lady did a wonderful presentation, but she had taken blank business cards and put a toothpick with a label of what each dish was on it. And okay, if you're doing a buffet at the Methodist Church, that might be a great idea, but it's about as medieval as earrings on a duck. And appearance is influenced by the dishes you use. We have had people just saw pieces off a plank and serve everything on pieces of plank. And they didn't even sand the edges. I don't care if the competitors use cookbooks. I don't care if they buy new cookbooks. That was someone asked me, do I allow the contestants to use cookbooks? I don't care if they buy new cookbooks the day they get their food. I don't care if they go through the haunted bookshop with fire and sword. I don't care if they steal a cooking laurel and tie him to a chair until they're finished cooking, as long as he doesn't complain that he's been kidnapped and wasn't properly recompensed for it. That would be bad. But see, when I'm running the Siege Cooking Contest at Penzic, the most important point to me is, do they produce food that is going to taste good and not make me sick? And cookbooks can help with that a lot. So yes, I let them use cookbooks. I let them look up things on the internet, although that can bite you in the butt. A couple of years now, I have provided one of one of the nights I provided Lupini beans, which are a medieval bean that is now only used in Italy. God bless the Italians, they are so freaking stubborn. Because it's toxic. If you don't cook it according to the directions on the package, it can make you vilely ill. But I told them to make it according to the directions on the package. I pointed out the directions and had them read them aloud in my presence. And they both prepared them perfectly according to the directions. They tasted exactly the way they should, except one of them called up her great-grandmother in Sicily and asked her grandmother how Sicilians cook lupini beans, because she was doing a Sicilian feast. And her grandmother told her, and the lupini beans arrived at the table with a light dressing of oil and red pepper flakes. Red pepper is one of my major allergies. Red pepper is a New World spice. You cannot use red pepper and produce a medieval dish. You can't. So that dish was not even counted towards her possible points. It got a 0, and that affected her score. So you do have to be careful. The last part of running a siege cooking contest, the way I do it, is the decision of whether or not you are going to give them cheat sheets. Now, the one you have to give them is, these are New World spices, don't use them. Because otherwise you'll get lupini beans with red pepper on it. But you can also tell them things like, remind them that all the food that they prepare was from a single time and place in the Middle Ages. And if they find that time and place or another time and place that had the same foods, they will get higher points. Another thing you can point out is that you can add water in any form you like. We had a couple that were given honey and vinegar, and I told them, water and salt. You may add nothing else except old world spices. Well, they proceeded to make an actual sharbat, the ancestor of sherbet, which is honey with various other flavorings, boiled to a syrup and spiced according to the local taste, and then poured over crushed ice. And it was fantastic. Now, water, ice is water. So that was as legal as church on Sunday. But most people don't think of something like that. The ones who do get higher points and have a better chance of winning. Do you tell them that on their sheet that you hand them? Or do you wait and see if they'll think of it? You have to decide that based on the audience you're getting as potential competitors. I have heard of a lady who ran a competition for New Shire. They were so green, if they stood still too long, they would take root. And they were all not only novice cooks in the sense of they haven't done SCA feast before, they were still working out of the college students' basic cook it on an iron cookbook. That was their level of experience. She gave them a booklet 20 pages thick. And they did great. Now, the method that she used for the judging was that each of the people laid out their entire presentation on one of the 5 tables for the 5 teams. And first, the local bigwig, I forget who he was, but he was like a knight or something that had moved into the area and started the Shire, got personally presented with dishes from each of the 5 teams. And then the rest went on those tables and they served it to all the populace, which under the circumstances was probably 30 people. But the competition became the feast. And no one of these brand new, scared of their own shoes kids had to be stuck with the job of cooking an entire feast, and nobody had to serve supermarket rotisserie chickens. It worked. It worked very, very well, apparently. Not only did everybody who was at the first event come back to the next one, but they hauled along roommates and the floor's docent or whatever, too, because it had been so amazing and they wanted more. So there are things that you should not do. There are foods that were used in period, we know were used in period, that just taste disgusting to modern people. Unless you're in Australia or maybe the London area, don't give them a live eel as one of their foods. Yes, live eels were regularly brought in tubs, still in water, to the cities to be sold, still alive. Don't do it. Completely aside from the issue of they might really botch the execution of said fish, and with eels, that matters because they've got teeth and they keep biting after you chop their heads off. But it may be illegal locally. In fact, I do not recommend, unless you are very certain you know the city and county regulations as well as the state laws, don't even give them a live chicken. Just too many ways it can go wrong. And having some poor soul be arrested because they chopped the head off a bird just as a car full of little kids from a sheltered background drives by, you don't want that. It's no fun. And it's kind of disturbing, and it gets you a bad reputation. And it could cost you the site next year. Make very certain that all your ingredients are still of cooking quality when you hand them out. If you hand people a partridge each and they were frozen when they got to the site, but that was 2 days ago, 1, all you judges will get sick. 2, most of your cooks will get sick. 3, you're an idiot. Yeah, it says you're not allowed to slaughter animals per corporate. Oh, good. I think that's a great idea because that simplifies the question immensely. And when you are going to be judging the foods, you have to give at least half an hour between each group's presentation. Now, if you want, you can give the most inexperienced team the first time to serve because you will be hungry and the food will taste a little better then. So you won't say something stupid like, my God, who poisoned this slop? And trust me, bad idea. However, you don't have to. You can just use a coin flip or a die roll. I don't know of any 3-sided dice, but I'll bet there are some. If you were doing 3 teams, and of course 5-sided and so on, yeah, easier. But you have to be careful when you are judging a siege cooking contest that you taste and taste only. You eat a bite when you are judging. Because if you go, oh, this is good, and start glomming it down, you are doing such an injustice to the next team that's a half an hour out. Because you're going to look at that stuff and it's going to taste bad simply because you're too full, which is unjust and just plain wrong. Have somebody with the judges who is not a judge, who can take the leftovers, if you're running it the way I run it, which is I get all the leftovers, and bag them up or whatever, jar them up if it's a liquid, and put them in an ice chest with ice in it, salted if necessary, or your refrigerator if you have a refrigerator, or whatever, so that they will be preserved and safe to eat for the rest of the event or until the next night of the contest, depending on what you're doing. And I know these are not even vaguely, period. But I now always provide those little dollar store picnic umbrellas, the netting things that go over the plates on the table to protect the food being served from the flies. And at Penzic from the dust, because my merchant's booth is on a main thoroughfare and people are walking by shaking God alone knows what off their shoes onto the road. And then the next guy shuffles by kicking up God alone knows what off the road. I have been told that I should get a set of those incredibly finely woven Southeast Asian baskets, which serve the same purpose in Southeast Asia and in fact are meant for that. We, being idiots, put fruit in them. I've never been able to afford them because they're about $11 each, and I use, on average, 12 to 15 of them a night. Just can't do that. But the $1 pop-up little netting things, that I can't afford. And it means that my food is still safe when I want to eat it the next night. If you can figure out another period solution for keeping the dust off of things, the flies off of things, hey, yay, tell me next time you see me. I'll start using it, as long as it doesn't cost $11 each. And the last thing is how you present the judging. Now, each judge is going to have 10 points in each of the 5 categories, and they're going to say, well, the taste was whatever. Don't be too surprised if those are wildly different. You may have one person who thinks that asparagus tastes slippery, and the fact that you chose asparagus as one of the 2 vegetables that night isn't going to mean a thing to him. He hates asparagus. The laurel, the cooking laurel, if you have one, may know something you don't about flavorings for this period and may go, oh my God, they use sumac leaves and it's England. And you're standing there going, but of course, they've studied it. They're going to know. But you end up with each of you judges having a list of their point total for each category. And then you add them and divide by the number of categories, by the number of judges, sorry, judges, not categories. And that gives you your total score for each category for that contestant. When you tell them who won, if one of the contestants scored abysmally, you don't mention that. Especially if the other 2 contestants were just about head to head. You tell them, I'm sorry you did not win this time. Since you did not win, you are eligible to be a contestant next year if you choose to be. And I have had many, many contestants go, oh, thank you, because this was fun. And by next year, I can get new pots, and they wander off, and the next year they come back and slay them. If you have 2 people head to head, one of them will probably get 1 or 2 points more than the other. You tell them this was so insanely close that it was a matter of a fraction. And they both feel proud of themselves. They both know that they were good. And then you say, but, Team A got that tiny bit higher. And since there has to be a winner, they're the winner. We once had people, don't announce the exact scores if somebody was way behind the others. Just tell them who won. But, excuse me, one year we did have an exact tie. Thank God it was the preliminary night. But 2 people got identical scores. And we had them flip a coin, and then one took the first of the bookcase full of prizes, and the next took their pick, and so on until all the prizes for that night were taken by one or the other of them. So if you have more than one prize, it can work out in your favor. Since I'm doing this to get people cooking and cooking period stuff, I tend to provide things like better dishes to use for presenting things, to improve the appearance of what you're serving, or cooking utensils that are not easily available. One year, my top prize was a lost leader special at my local supermarket. It was a $38 chest with 5 cast iron cooking pieces in it. Yes, I know cast iron cannot be documented conclusively to our period for any cooking use. But for practical purposes, brass cooking utensils, although they're absolutely ironclad authentic, you'll pardon the phrase, they can kill people. So no. I have had a lot of weird things in other years. One year, I think it was I think the prize everybody was after was a silver butter dish in the shape of a cow, a lying down cow. But it was the dumbest thing. But they had those in the Renaissance, and everybody wanted it. Another year, I had a cast iron kettle which had been repaired by brazing a crack. So it was safe to cook in, as long as you polish that little strip of brass every single time. And I included the information on how to do that. But I had that out with a sign in it saying, Maison Reeve Siege Cooking Contest, top prize, apply here. An entire barony walks up with a baron in the front, in his full regalia, and he points at the cauldron and says, you see that? And they go, yes, my Lord Baron. And he says, one of you is winning me that. Sign up. Unfortunately, I don't remember if one of the teams from his barony did win it. Somebody did. So we're going to take questions now. So unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question, or you can put it on the chat and I'll try to read it before it flies away. And then we're going to go into competing in a siege cooking contest and how to have a better chance of winning. So anyone want to ask a question? If nobody asks a question, I'm going to think you don't like my class, and then I will be sad.
So I'm loving your class, and I love that you have such a way with words. I'm enjoying it immensely. I'm Magdalene. I'm from Atenveld. I've been in the SCA 28 years and a feastocrat and judge of culinary things over the years. I wanted to ask, do you record, and as in have someone take pictures of the entrance or the process or anything of your competitions?
At Penzic, I do when I can get a photographer, because the paper likes pictures. And they're more likely to put something about the siege cooking contest in the paper if they have pictures.
Oh,
That
yeah.
is by no means every year, or not even nearly every year, but it has happened. And yes, if the participants are willing,
Absolutely.
yes, I recommend it. But make very sure the participants are willing. I had a contestant one year who asked when she was ready to sign up, will there be any photographs and what will happen to them? And I said, well, we haven't got a photographer this year, so no. This was before good cell phone cameras, by the way. And
Sure.
she said, well, great, because my cousin had her picture in the paper and her ex-founder.
First world problems. I got you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was a good question. Now, I've always wanted to hire a videographer to do the whole 25 hours, watch someone go through from beginning to end. I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
But I've never been able to afford it because they started $1,000 a day.
Well, if you get some of the folks who enjoy making the videos for the SCA, maybe you get it for free.
You need SCA videographers. That's why you need to do this in Caid, where Hollywood is.
Yeah, true point. True point. Well, I'm going to put in the event discussion post photographs from one of the competitions we had in Atenveld. It was at Estrella War in 2019. I was able to judge, and it was called the Battle of the Beasts, and it was the third time we'd done it. And we had, I believe, 5 different kingdoms participate as teams. And so I'll just throw in the pictures that I took, because that's why I asked the question, is I kind of enjoy recording feast by photographs, because, you know, food is ephemeral. It's you taste it, it's gone, but at least pictures kind of help the cooks remember what they went through and so forth. And 2 beautiful ladies, both with their cooking and their persons, from Avocal, and they had driven like 32 hours to come to Arizona from Canada, and they won, and their dishes are pictured. So I'll put that in so people can look later on the event.
Okay,
Thank you
Great.
all.
who else has a question? Anybody? I did such a good job that everybody understands every word I said and nobody has a question. Well, that's very flattering if it's true. Mistress Magdalene, if you're trying to talk, you're on mute.
I actually just turned it to mute after I asked my question. Thank you.
Oh,
I figured I didn't want feedback. I'm still in my office at work, but I have some flexibility, but my
Yeah.
phone sometimes will ring and so forth. So I didn't want to have interruptions, but
Okay.
yeah, and I also didn't want to hog the questions. So.
Someone asked if it's okay to ask about a specific recipe they're looking for. If it's a short question, yeah, you can go ahead and do that. And then we're going to start on the entering cooking contest and how to have a better chance of winning. Are you still there? Do you have your Zoom meeting on mute? Okay. Yeah, unmute and ask.
Sorry, my hands shake so bad. I've got essential tremors, so it's complicated.
I sympathize, I assure you. I have not yet been diagnosed with essential tremor, but I'm supposed to wear wrist weights, and I have utensils with handles that weigh half a pound, no joke, because of my tremors.
I actually try to crochet and everything with this, so I completely sympathize. I'm from the barony of the Ridrick Hale. It's not my home currently because I'm down in Kentucky where my daughter is, but I was up there for over 30 years. At one of the events that I went to, it was the baronial birthday bash. And that year there was a lady who made what was called a soused brawn. I found the recipe years later when I was in college and actually cooked it up at college. And it was served in the campus restaurant. It went before a person could blink. It was that popular. Problem is, I lost 30 years of my life up there. Still sucks. Pardon.
You lost the recipe?
I'm trying to find that recipe again. It didn't use beef, it used a pork loin, and I've got a monstrous pork loin in my freezer, and the only thing I can think of that I want to do with it is that recipe. I can't find it for trying.
Well, you might try putting it on the chat in the main room. I don't have such a recipe, but I have been served it over a dozen times over the 48 years I've been in the SCA. So somebody has it.
Believe me, I keep trying to find the darn thing. Here, unfortunately, resources, especially at the library, are lacking sorely.
If you can check the Good Cookery site and Stephan Florilegium. There are unbelievable numbers of recipes on those two sites. And
there
you
any
might very well find it on one of them.
sites to me?
Pardon?
I'd write them down, but like I say, writing is a complicated thing.
There's one of them.
Okay, now I gotta hope that stays there long enough for me to get them down. I'm sorry, I'm falling apart and I don't mean to. You guys are just so awesome. And
Ma'am, if God had had any plans on making this world perfect, he would have had to start by locking the humans out.
it's hard to lose 30 years of your life and try to get over all the trauma, you know. But I hope I can, if anybody finds that recipe, God bless you, and I'd be grateful. And if you want, I can give you my email address to send it to me.
The name of the dish was soused brawn. That's spelled SOUSED space
Right.
RAWN. Oh, AUN, yeah, that's the older spell.
BRAWN. Yes, that's the recipe I'm looking for. I've looked for it in general, and all I keep finding is beef. And one was done specifically was done with pork. And when
Well,
I
you
look at the ingredients that go with it, it's different, a little bit different for the beef than it, and the way it's handled than it was for the pork loin. I remember when I did it in college, I had to wrap it up in cheesecloth and tie it tight, put it in a big pot of water. And there was like whole nutmegs and cloves and a whole bunch of wonderful spices that were added to it. And like I say, it came, and then once it's cooked there for a while, you take it out of the pot, put it on a pan, and you bake it the rest of the way in the oven to get that crispy, you know? And the people that were on the campus, students and people that come in, the teachers and that, they just, it went, like I say, it went like that.
Yeah. Just so you know, so in case anybody here does not know, brawn is specifically the flesh of a wild pig, as opposed to a domesticated pig.
Okay.
It doesn't matter in terms of our cooking for most purposes, but the high spice level is because brawn can taste pretty strong sometimes.
Yeah, that I can kind of understand, you know. But like I say, if you look it up now, like if I search the internet for it, all it keeps coming up with is the brawn being beef, and this is not what it was originally, not what I had.
That's why I suggest you post it on the main chat on the main room, because most people are going to be able to see that chat, and that you look up Good Cookery and the Florilegium section on cooked pork recipes.
Okay, I'll probably put it up on the site, the Facebook page, and then somebody sends those locations to look for it there. It'll be easier for me to get it. I'm on my phone. My computer's so old I can't use Zoom on it. It kind of blows it up, and it takes me 3 hours to reboot the phone. What do you think?
What did the food look like? Like, what was it like?
It's a pork loin. And it's just a plain pork loin. You wrap it in cheesecloth and tie it up tight. In fact, I use cord to tie it. And then it goes into a pot. There's some wine that's in there. There's spices, water, a whole, I know.
So it wasn't like an aspic or anything?
Nope. You cooked it part of the way in that pot, then took it out and took the cloth off of it and put it in the oven to finish cooking it so you could get it to brown, and then you sliced it up to serve it.
Okay. Because
Well,
Google's giving me lots of aspects for some reason. So, okay.
Well, brawn in aspic, which is not souse brawn, is very popular in England nowadays, and that's probably why.
Yeah, and like I say, over the years, I've been trying to find it again. I see, I had all my recipes on 5x8 cards up in Buffalo. And when I left most of my stuff, Dagenham and Kigfran, took for me, and they've got a lot of that stuff up there, but there's so much to sort through. Like I say, 30 years of my life, that's a lot of stuff. I want to get my library back, damn it.
Oh, someone has just posted to the Facebook group for you asking for the recipe, so it may happen. Keep an eye on the Facebook group for this event.
I'm not kidding. I got a pork loin in my freezer right now, and the thing is like, oh God, it's like about a 10-pound pork loin. I mean, this thing is monstrous. And I'm lucky that I at least one pan that I can actually put in the oven and cook in, because my stove is so small I can't put a sheet pan in there.
Hey, someone just posted a good cookery recipe on the chat. Could they put that on the Facebook group so that it won't go away the second I close out this class? And then we have
great if you could do that, put it on the Facebook page. I'm on there, although my name comes up as Vincent, spelled with a Y instead of an I. That name, the name it's got a history, and I had that before the internet existed. And my email is the same thing, before the internet even existed.
We have to start the second part of the class now,
That's
but it
okay.
looks like you're on the right track.
Oh, I'm so grateful, all of
No,
you.
it's fine. It was a good question.
Everybody, it's crazy out there still, so be safe and be well, all of you. I don't want to hear anyone dying from that COVID anymore. I got enough of it where I'm at, so. And I'm sorry about the tears. I'm just, yeah.
Anybody who tries to tell you you shouldn't cry, it better be able to explain why God gave you tear ducts, okay? So, entering a siege cooking contest. First, know the rules. If there is any way, if it's even theoretically possible, figure out a way to get the rules in advance. A month in advance is not too long. It really isn't. Because the rules are going to change so much of what you're doing. If there's no points on appearance, you don't have to steal your grandfather's Boy Scout summer camp trunk and buy a bale of straw so that you can bring all your genuine period ceramics to the event, for example. So you need to know the rules. 2, do the research as far in advance as you're allowed. Now, because I do this at Penzic, I do encourage people to sign up ahead of time, but a lot of people just walk by and see the sign and said, oh, that sounds like fun. And they've had no time to do any research whatsoever, freaking damned ever, which is one of the reasons why I let them use cookbooks and the internet and anything else they can find. 3, make very, oh, thank you. Make very, very sure that your team knows you're volunteering them for this. I have had people return the food because nobody in their camp knew anything about it. And they said, the hell, you'll use up the entire kitchen on the night of the camp's annual party. So you don't want that to happen to you. Make sure they know and are okay with it. And if possible, if there's only one entrant and the team is not allowed to get part of the prize, you provide little prizes for them, thank you gifts for their having entered. And trust me, it doesn't have to be expensive. A really pretty button will work. The point is not its value, it's that it reminds them that you thanked them. And it will remind them for years to come. They'll run across that button in their little site token jar and go, oh yeah, Alessandra gave me this when I helped her cook rice. And hey, that's good. And the 4th thing to do before you get to the event is, as far as possible, get yourself and your team ready. If you have to, especially if you're dealing with college students or high schoolers, make sure you call everybody the night before and say, hey, you need to be in bed now. We're going to be working our butts off tomorrow. Because you will be. And if you're tired or hungover, or you have a horrible head cold and you didn't bring your Dramamine and you can't smell or taste a thing, you're going to fail. You don't want to fail. It's no fun. When you get to the event, oh, and make sure that the group you're camping with, if any, is okay with this. You do not want them breaking down the back wall of the kitchen tent so they can eat all the rice. When you get to the event, make sure that the kitchen is good enough to be safe for this. It's one thing if your barony has weekly potlucks and everybody already has each other's germs. And it's quite another thing if you're cooking for total strangers who may come from a different state and not even be used to the minerals in your water. So make sure that you have everything ready to go to get it clean enough. Bring your own if you know the camp doesn't have a very good sanitation system, because sanitation is going to be critical. Pots and pans, it depends on if you're doing it in public in front of strangers or if you're doing it in your own camp and let the devil take the hindmost. If you have to borrow your great aunt's hog boiling kettle in order to make the soup for the contest, just, talk her into it. Tell her she'll get all the pictures of everything they did and she can brag at her quilting for newborns thing at the church. And she will. But make very, very sure you take good enough care of it, because especially cast iron, but also cast brass, are brittle. And if you don't pack them right, they're going to die on you, which not only will make you fail to win the contest, but will be a major fail in terms of your family's giving you the stink eye for another 20 years of Easter dinners because you broke your great aunt's hog boiling kettle. Also, make sure you have at least two outfits in separate Ziploc bags or waterproof bags of some other kind. The ones they issue to the Army is pretty good, in separate places, because somebody is going to drop a hash brown that has been soaked in grease since before Charlemagne was born on one of your bags. And you're going to discover that the outfit you wanted to present your food in is now greased from head to toe, and you look like an escapee from the waste fats pit at a basic training camp for the US Army. So make sure you have two. Clean, coordinated. Now, if you know ahead of time what time and place you're going to be doing, make sure it matches that. It helps with the presentation a lot. If you want to do an elaborate presentation, and not all feasts require it, and some don't even want it because it wastes time and they're having a lot of contestants. But if you are going to do an elaborate presentation, have a list of the things you need to do it so that you can check them off, who's bringing them, and you've checked them yourself to see that your set of antlers aren't split and twisted and smelling of mold, for example. Or your drinking horn still is lined and is not going to make everything taste like dead cow. Very dead cow. Very, very dead cow. Don't ask me how I know that. If you have all your ducks in a row as far as that, then the next thing to do is have the equipment ready to contain and keep safe the ingredients you're given. You may very well be given a 5-pound supermarket plastic bag of rice. You need to have some external container for that because it won't get back to your campsite without ripping. because they use the same weight of plastic for the 5-pound bags as they do for the half-pound bags. And it's not up to it. If you have a meat, for example, you want salted ice in the cooler chest it's going in to keep it below, all right, only a degree or two, but it helps, below freezing until you're ready to use it. If eggs, you want to have, if you get given a carton of eggs, you want to have something you can put them on, because eggs in the US especially are washed. And that means that their natural protective coating, which keeps bacteria from migrating inside the shell, are completely gone. Which means, one, they've got to be kept cold, and two, they've got to be kept dry. Because water allows bacteria to migrate from the environment into the egg beautifully. And you're going to crack open one of those eggs and discover that you really do have green eggs. No, don't do that. Excuse me, my back is deciding that it doesn't like my posture, which is nothing new. When you plan the order you're going to cook things in, if you don't know in advance what foods you will have, as soon as you get them, sit down and spend 15 minutes figuring out how long each part of your feast takes to cook and what things can be cooked at the same time. If you have a 4-burner Coleman stove, you're going to go, great, I can cook my 5 pounds of rice at the time I use this great big frying pan to flat sear the steaks. No, you can't. They're not going to both fit on a Coleman stove. You've got to pick one. Don't plan for that, and you're going to be swearing in languages you didn't even know you knew. If you are going to be doing any open fire or ground cooking, or if you decide to do any open fire or ground cooking, bring a heavy, preferably boiled wool apron for everybody who's going to be near that fire. You can use an old army blanket, old enough that the edges still have binding on them and not just a line of stitching. It's solid wool, and you can boil it and produce boiled wool aprons, because a spark that lands on boiled wool extinguishes. And trust me on this one, you do not need to enter a cooking contest wearing your own portable crematorium. Never cook wearing rayon. Never cook wearing bamboo cloth. Never cook wearing palm frond cloth, because all of them are so insanely fragile that if you mention the word match in their presence, they go up. Wool, preferably boiled wool, and sleepwear fabrics that are authorized for use with infants in any plain color that suits your fancy. But those are flame retardant. They're made that way to survive washing without losing their flame retardancy. And if you can't get boiled wool, get that. Then, when you start the cooking, set a timer. Ideally a water clock, but anything, even if it's a phone. Set a timer. Every time that goes off, everybody washes their hands. Everybody. By the way, bring bleach or professional grade restaurant sanitizer for use on the pots, for use on the plates, for use on the utensils, for use on everything. Because you're cooking in an unfamiliar place and under unfamiliar conditions, the last thing you can afford is contamination. Yes, they did have ways to make sure that their utensils and so on were clean, but they're not ways we would want to use. And when it comes to survival, you don't mess with authentic if authentic isn't safe, or if people are going to avoid it because it smells so bad that they would rather die. Use the modern stuff if that's what works. as you're cooking the stuff, anything that in the past you know has had a tendency to burn, you have to set a guard over that item. 5 pounds of rice, that was the nightmare, because you even if you have a pot big enough for 5 pounds of rice, you do not have the right kind of flame for 5 pounds of rice. You need one of those great big restaurant wings like this that are designed for a pot that can handle 5 pounds of rice, and you don't have one. Unless you bought one of the Army surplus kitchens on a trailer, and in that case, good luck. You may have other problems. Have someone to be a taster who is not one of the cooks. You and your friends, part of the reason they're your friends is that you pretty much like the same food. So you can go out together and you'll all agree to go to Chinese as opposed to Greek. But that means that you need someone who does not share your taste in food to double check the flavors before you add the other 20 grains of paradise to the dish. Mind you, I love grains of paradise, and my God, what it does to pork, it's astonishing. But there's a limit even to good things. If you want them to stay good things, you have to account for that. I have a friend who's a brilliant camp cook, and she regularly borrows from the camp that camps next door to her at most events, a guy who will eat anything as long as he doesn't have to pay for it. And she uses him as her taster because he's always going to be willing to taste the stuff. And he doesn't like any of the things she likes in mundane food. So he's an excellent counterbalance to her idea of what's good flavoring for an SCA dish. As the food is prepared, you've got to figure out a way to keep it hot if it's supposed to be hot and cold if it's supposed to be cold. I have had a Jell-O mold that's been sitting in the sun for 4 hours. I'm never doing that again. Not on a bet. Not even if it were a big bet. Don't go there. There ain't nothing you like at the other end of that road, so don't go there. When you are ready to serve, if there's any possibility that even a little dust has landed on the serving side of those plates and dishes, wash them again. Yeah, it's going to take you an extra few minutes, wash them again. Make sure the serving utensils are covered or contained until they get there so that they're absolutely clean when you start serving. Any presentation you're doing, make sure that the verbal parts and the dancing parts, if you bring dancing girls and whatever, have been practiced. You may have to assign someone on your team specifically to that job, preferably someone with community theater training. You have to figure out how to bring the food from wherever you produced it to wherever it's going to be served. Now, if you were all cooking together, 5 teams around a common fire pit in the central part of an event with 100 mundanes who have no clue what you're doing and just think it's, like the Civil War, that won't be far, thank God, because you've already got enough annoyances. But when I do this at Penzic, they could be coming from, I am not joking, literally a quarter mile away. And that makes a difference to how they bring stuff. We have had people bring things in a kid's wagon. We have had people bring things balanced on the head of a bunch of ladies in Greek chitons. But you've got to figure it out, and you've got to be ready with the equipment and team you need for that purpose. When you are serving, if there is any flub that is not close to as major as pouring the pea soup in the Baron's lap, don't say anything. If you point it out, they have to take points off for it. It's like when you're singing. If you just realize you put 2 verses backwards, you don't apologize. You keep singing. Half the audience has no idea, and the other half will be sympathetic because they've done it too. Well, when you're serving for a competition, don't apologize unless it's so major that there's no possibility of anything less than a full apology being acceptable. when you have served, especially if the teams are serving close together, so the other teams are there while you're serving, get out of the way. If you're allowed to keep the leftover food, get it bagged up and taken home or back to your camp or whatever as soon as you've served. If they're supposed to keep the food, if they don't have someone whose job is to prepare the food for storage, it's now your job, and be ready for that. Bring the Ziplocs, bring the empty mason jars that you ran through the superwash cycle on your dishwasher. Be ready for it. Do not, under any circumstances whatsoever, comment on another contestant's food. I know of no faster way to get the judges' backs up against you than to have you say, I would never put that spice on that meat. They're going to be angry. You deserve it. Don't do it. However, if there's something you like after their food has been judged, then you can ask them about it, off to the side where it won't interfere with the judges hearing the next presenter. But they'll be thrilled to death, and they'll be more than glad to give you a taste if they've got one, and to explain the details of what went right and wrong. And you can learn so much from the other contestants if you're polite and friendly and don't annoy the judges. Annoying judges is bad. I checked. When the judging is complete and everybody comes forward to hear their scores, if they're going to be given the scores, or to hear who won, don't blow up. I don't care if you're a professional chef who works in a 5-star restaurant and is the, what do you call it, the autocrat of the kitchen. Don't blow up. If you rip off your apron and throw it in your judge's face because you didn't win, guess how far that's going to spread in the modern age of the internet. If you win, don't crow, don't smirk, don't do a little happy dance. Say thank you and introduce your team. And tell the judges how wonderful they were and how much they helped you. The judges will be impressed. The other contestants will be impressed. Your team will be willing to do it again. And if you have a prize system like I've been using lately, where there's a variety of prizes and the winner chooses first, do not make a big obvious, aha, this one's worth $40 and the others are only worth $10. Don't do that. Take the $40 one if that's really the one you want. But don't make a scene and don't gloat. When it's all over, do a post-mortem. Sit down with your team, with your camp if you use their kitchen, with the presenters if you had help with the presentation, like dancing girls, whatever, and figure out what could have gone better and what went well and you want to repeat it. Because there will be other contests. And if you pulled something that absolutely laid the judges in the aisles because they were so impressed they passed out, you want to remember so you can do it again. And always, always, always follow the rules. I don't care if they grow wild on the site. If the rules say you can only use those 10 spices, do not add mint because you found it. It's against the rules. It might be against the rules because someone of the judges will literally have to haul out an EpiPen and call for an ambulance if he tastes mint. Okay, let's see what time it is. Okay, it is 7 minutes till this is supposed to be over, but I will keep talking until someone else is supposed to be in this room if you want me to. So we can ask questions. You can ask questions now. Anybody got a question? You have to unmute yourself first, remember. I am going to look at the chat and see if there was anything in the chat that I can answer. Okay. Audio, no. Yeah, I've done over 21 siege cooking competitions, and at least 15 of them were 3 preliminary nights with 3 contestants each, and then a finals with the 3 winners of the 3 preliminaries. Success with providing I've had a lot of fun and success with supplying ingredients and recipes of different levels of complexity. Everyone shops, then goes away and cooks for 2 hours, and I'll come back together and try everyone else's dishes and talk about the choices they made. That's a perfectly valid way to do it. I don't happen to do it that way, but that's because my needs are different. Presentation in persona, yes. I bet the cooking laurel would mind being tied to a chair. It kind of depends on the cooking laurel. Some of them actually have turned out to be mentors to the cook that they got shanghaied in a helping, clear up till that cook became a laurel. Hello? Someone trying to talk? I don't have a handout precisely. I'm hoping to get one, but if I get one, I'm going to be putting it up online on my own website. I don't have the website running yet, but I'm going to try this summer to get it running. Let's see. Time to reline the horn. Oh, you betcha. I love the washing stations. I love them. I think they're great. They do prevent war tummy. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And it's going to be on the West Kingdom YouTube. I specifically asked for that because I've never had a recording of a class I teach. And I'd like to be able to watch it and see what I did that I really shouldn't have done and what worked and so on. So if there's anything that you want to point out that you didn't understand or that you thought I didn't do right, please do so, because I do want to improve. I mean, the only people who have no need to improve are already in coffins. So I'm only 66. I'm not ready for that one yet. Oh, someone has their hand up. Let's see, who is that?
That's Juliana.
Hi.
Let's see. Hold on. There we are. Okay. I thought I was muted still. Sorry. Hi. Yeah, I have a question. It relates to the allergy thing that you brought up earlier. If you, I mean, you're handing out set ingredients to everyone. If one of the people who's participating happens to have an allergy to something that is on their ingredient list, do you have a substitution that you give them, or do you allow them to substitute something that they have? Like, how does that work the other way around?
I cannot, because I'm allergic to half the planet.
Oh, okay.
Tell them not to cook that thing, just to give it back to me. And we will weight their points so that the fact that they don't have that item is not going to count against them.
Okay.
But since
Speaking as another, go ahead.
Mhm.
I said, speaking as another person who runs these, usually you have to talk to us before the fact and we can come up with another ingredient for you. But we want everyone to be able to participate.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. When I'm doing it, since I get so many walk-ins signing up, I will try to ask them if they have any important allergies to tell me about them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because I can always shuffle them to a different day of the preliminaries if the day that they originally thought of had an ingredient they can't use, or I can switch the ingredient so that what was going to be the second preliminary becomes the first.
Okay.
And since they always know if they're going to be a finalist, I can check that before I even buy the ingredients for the final.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I just, we're trying to put one together. I'm from Caid, by the way, so kind of a different area than a lot of what I have been seeing on the meetings lately. But we're trying to put something together for the next big war that they're allowing us to have here coming up. And they've done the competition a couple different ways. And I wanted to try to switch things up a little bit this year and try to offer a few different variety of dishes and things that they could do. And that was a question that came up. So I just wanted to see how some of the other areas handle it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, if you are announcing it in advance, have everybody who signs up list their allergies so that you can then tailor what you give them.
Okay.
It's so much easier that way than the way I have to do it. Because as I said, 90% of my contestants they walk by, they saw the sign, they went, ooh.
Mhm. Yeah, no, with as much time as we have on our hands right now, it makes more sense to do it ahead of time. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Who else? I wish I could find them right now. I have somewhere lists from some of my contents of the ingredients that I gave out and what time and place they were supposed to be from. Yeah. For example, if you're doing an event, if you're doing a contest where you are giving them foods that you know were available in medieval Scandinavia, and they go, wait a minute, these foods were available in Novgorod. You don't penalize them for it being the wrong place or the wrong time unless you told them in advance. If you told them in advance, then you've got a genuine cause to take their points down because they did Novgorod. But if you didn't tell them in advance, if you let them figure it out, which is how I do it, gets me better food, then they figured out another time and place that uses those foods. Woohoo! More variety. This is great. I really do like the form of having people, the contestants cook the feast. It's a great way to prevent all of the burden of the feast falling on one set of shoulders or one team, because each team is cooking separately and they're going to serve separately, and they're only going to be responsible for what they cook and for what they serve and for their pans and their bowls. You get the idea. And a lot of times an inexperienced cook is willing to try if she's one of five because she knows people will still eat even if she flubs it. What time is it?
It's 2:32.
Yeah. When is the next class in this breakout room?
Well, we close each breakout room, so that's kind of irrelevant.
Oh.
There's the
Okay.
next class that comes up is at 3:00. So if you have more to say it. Go ahead, say it. If you don't, we can call it a day.
So does anybody have more questions, or can I get into fun things that people have done at my siege cooking contest, which is just reminiscing and chatting? It's not any big heavy deal that's a regular part of the class. You'll just hear about some funny stuff.
Sort of the, no kidding, there we were, 9 against 1,000. Those were the toughest 9 guys we ever met. Bam.
Well, aside from the guy with the buckets, the first year I did this.
Oh, God save us from professional chefs. They don't know spit about medieval cooking. Not a thing.
Oh, I have had people who fortunately did not then sign up to be participants, who just about ripped my ears off over insisting on period dishes. That's offensive, that's wrong, that's evil, that's vile, this is Penzic, why can't they make chili?
Totally missed the point.
It kind of, yeah. So if it being period recipes matters to you, put that in the rules. Because otherwise, OMG. Now me, I don't insist on period recipes. I'll just tell them that anything that they cook, which is not a period recipe, gets a 0 on historical accuracy. And then if they must cook chili and can figure out a way to do it with no tomatoes or green or red or any other kind of pepper, who knows? Maybe they found a recipe from Mesoamerica. Yeah. When you have contestants that are all serving together, the one I mentioned that the Shire did, each team was responsible for their own sanitation station. They had to set up and use one. That was part of their prep. And actually, they were judged on sanitation because it was a new Shire and they were terrified of anybody getting food poisoning. So that's a factor you could throw in if you think it's important. There are many times when it will be very important. The only cooking area is right next to the super highway, and there are chemical trucks driving by with leaking faucets. Yeah, you cover everything. Odd stuff, but odd stuff sometimes makes all the difference. One year, it so happened that one of the preliminary nights was the same day as an SCA herbalist did her weed walk, which is taking you all around a site and pointing out all the things that we now consider weeds that were foodstuffs or medicines in the Middle Ages, and how you use them and what you do for them. And one of the contestants was, we could use the weeds, and the head of their group had to sit on him and say, it's not in the bag you were given. You're only allowed to use what's in the bag you were given, and spices. And he says, there were 2 mints in that weed walk.
You don't know what they've been sprayed with.
Well, true, but that was before Penzic was doing universal mosquito spraying twice a war. It was safer then. But they made something that was flavored with mint, and it was very nice, which was clever because it was something that had to be flavored with fresh mint, that you couldn't use a dried mint. Another person, another year with a weed walk, decided that they were going to decorate their plates with all the various stuff that they found on the weed walk, and they looked up the humoral theory value of the stuff they found. So they served the beef, which is considered hot and dry, and around the platter, on a separate bigger platter, was a collection of herbs that can provide a warm and wet counterbalance to the warm and dry beef. And they told us so, and suggested which ones would be best if we had other problems. They got lots of points for that one. People have dressed up stuff in all kinds of ways. One year, I gave out 2 bags of lentils, 1 red lentils and 1 green lentils, because they only had 1 bag of green lentils each, and it just wasn't enough, because this was the year my son was there. One side made a lovely porridge, red and green lentils, mixed lentil porridge, yay, tasted good. The other side ground some of the lentils to a paste and made green dumplings with a red filling and red dumplings with a green filling.
I like it.
Same exact ingredients. And by the way, the outsides were spiced differently from the insides, and the insides and outsides were spiced differently from each other. It was fantastic and visually very impressive. There were the people who have used ice as an additional ingredient and made stuff like sharbats and some weird Persian thing where you pack a dish in ice and then excavate it when you get there, and sort of unearth on ice the dish and then serve it, and it's covered in little tiny crystals of ice, and you lift the lid and the contents are really cold, and that was cool. We've had people provide old style Roman ewers where you pour from 4 feet up and you have to hit the cup.
You better be
It
good
didn't-
at it.
Yeah, it didn't cost them an extra second. It didn't include an extra ingredient or an extra flavoring or any extra cooking work. But they had one guy who had a really good, steady hand practice the night before and half the day just pouring. And they were doing the last year, the ingredients they were given was the last years of Rome in Britain. So they had all Roman style serving of everything. And it was wicked cool to see them pouring. Because it was so right. You know, you're doing a Roman feast, you should be pouring from 4 feet up to prove how skilled your servants are. Or slaves, but you know, whatever. By the way, we had one set of contestants one year who were going to bring the dishes to the table held by ladies on leashes.
Oh dear.
Fortunately, the person they talked to disabused them of this notion. Who's got their hand up? Someone has their hand up and I can't tell who it is.
I don't see one.
There's one on my screen.
Mhm. Nope, you're all the way to the left. That's all I got.
Okay, well,
Let's
it
start-
should be on their picture of themselves, so let's see if I can find it. Nope, I can't find it.
We could start calling names and see. Hey, Gwen, talk to us.
Yeah,
Give
so,
Give us your "There We Were" night against 1,000 story. I know you got him.
oh yeah, everybody's got them. Even if it's their second event, they've got them. And, oh, on the subject of spicing, please do remember if you're using a Renaissance recipe where they give something that at least resembles proportions about how much stronger spices are now than then. 20 grains of pepper in 10 servings of soup is going to be infelicitous. Cloves, in the Middle Ages, enough cloves to fit on the top of a gold coin was how many cloves that gold coin bought. Don't use handfuls. Hands
Cloves
full.
take over anyway. Oh my God, you don't want to do a lot of cloves.
Yeah. And by the way, nutmegs, yes, they were grown in the Caribbean in insane numbers, but they're not a Caribbean thing. They're old world. So stuff like that can trip you up. And well, that's pretty much all I've got, except if you're keeping the food, if you have to end up throwing something away, make sure you do it in the dark of night, preferably 3 in the morning. Because if you don't, somebody's gonna tell them. And that's rude. Just
It
plain
is
rude.
rude.
Oh, sources. This is actually from my Rob Peter to Feed Paul class, but I might as well throw it in because for the people running a siege cooking contest, this can make things much more fun. If you live in or relatively near, I'd say an hour's drive, but then I'm old and creaky, a major city, someplace there's an exotic meat place. You're going to have to dig for it in many cities, especially now that we don't have phone books. But again, we do have the internet, so you can look it up on there. Rabbit meat for sale, quails for sale, for meat quails for sale, etc. So if you can find them, you can have available medieval meats that aren't available in a supermarket. If you're doing this, make sure everything else you give them is blue plate special at the local diner normal.
You don't want to scare them with too many weird things.
Yes. Go to the ethnic groceries.
Yes.
One year we somehow stumbled into a German sausage store. They were very proud to announce on their front window that they had over 2,000 different German sausages
Wow.
for sale, already in the store, ready to buy. And one of the things they had, it translated out of German as hunter's meat, was basically blocks of salt beef. I mean, solid blocks. If you really wanted to, you could have tried the Mutiny on the Bounty thing of carving a snuff box out of it.
Scary.
Yeah, but we bought two, had them have one of the blocks, and we gave that to two of our contestants as their meat. And they looked at it and went,
What?
I cooked it.
My secret
I've given
weapon
them-
for stores is the Chinese market. I can get call, I can get little birdies, I can get discount ducks with so limbs, but the breasts are fine. Eels we get those frozen. Okay, we don't. You remember, we're not messing with live things either. We do have a hand up now. Gwen Cat.
Howdy.
Howdy,
Sorry for
Dan.
the Monday, and I'm doing pay work on the side. Don't tell my boss. One of the things that was done in one of the siege competitions I entered several years ago was we were given a couple of mystery ingredients. I don't know if you've ever done that. And my head cook and I actually miscommunicated and lost on one point, because I thought she was asking whether I wanted to use the yogurt, and I said, yeah, sure. She was asking if I thought that was yogurt. It turned out to be kefir.
Ah,
There's not that big a difference.
The other thing we had was a beautiful, beautiful fillet of what we identified as really beautiful beef and made a lovely beef tartare out of. It was venison. It was farm-raised venison, and it was super, super mild, and it was really yummy, but we missed identifying it as venison.
yeah.
And yeah, I will
I-
second the ethnic grocery store for blood, for quail, for duck, for rabbit, for, I don't know what it is, but it could be interesting.
Yeah.
Since when I do it, all my ingredients are secret until they get handed their bag.
No, even after we were handed the bag, everything in the bag was identified, but there were 5 unidentified ingredients that we had to either figure out what they were. The spice was caraway, it was not cumin, but we got that one right. And the points for identifying those items correctly counted toward win or
Yeah.
not. And like I said, missing the kefir for yogurt lost us the point, and it was that close a competition. 1
Yeah.
point made a difference.
Wow.
I usually tell them what they're getting because, as I said, I'm a merchant. This is going to be my next 3 days' food. I want to make sure it's good. But the way you've seen it done is a perfectly reasonable way to do it. It's not like everybody has to follow my instructions. I got over being that arrogant a very long time ago, at least mostly.
I was just curious if others had done it that way or not. And I think it might make more sense to have at the start, okay, here are some spices or some ingredients. Can you identify them correctly? Okay, here's what they really are. Now go off and cook.
Yeah, that could work.
But yeah, I have
In
run the
fact-
competitions too. I'm not a huge competition fan. The last time I was in hey, let's compete against each other. Here's the ingredients and make stuff. I rounded up the other 2 teams and said, we could do a whole lot more toward feeding this entire group of people if we all pool our resources and work together. And we had a blast. The organizer was a little pissy because they couldn't award the prize to one winning group. But those of us who played, oh, it was fantastic cooking with all the others.
Yeah, I have gotten the most interesting contestants at mine. We had a 9-year-old girl who wanted to compete. And since I only had 2 contestants that night and, there's 3 bags of food, I said, well, if you can bring your parents or guardians or whoever is responsible for you while you're here, and they agree that this is okay, sure.
Why not?
And she ran clear out to the Serengeti, poor dear, and dragged back her grandparents and said, them, I asked, they said it's okay. And I said, well, they have to tell me it's okay. And her grandfather said, she's an idiot, she's gonna burn everything, but she'll learn. And her grandmother said, she's dreadfully clever, dear, and she's fried bologna for you 1,000,000 times, which was not, in my opinion, very much of a recommendation, but she did beautifully. She didn't win, but she had so much fun. The rest of the barony came to thank me for letting her compete.
Yeah. Yep, that's the fun part, is who can you hook?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very big agenda of mine. If they're old enough to actually do the thing, if they are legally allowed to do the thing, they should be allowed to try the thing.
Yeah.
And I've employed loud children as an event announcing, a little field heraldry without setting foot on the fighting field, and harness that energy. You may
Yes.
be calling them master, mistress, or majesty tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. I did not get my laurel for the clothier's arts. That's what Scroll says, but that's not the truth. I got my laurel for being kind to a green 19-year-old at her first event that her roommates dragged her to with the information, oh, you're gonna like it, it's fun, here's your dress, and then they all went off to fight.
Oh.
And she's sitting there in the very back corner of the hall doing this. And I sat down next to her and croaked. I was vilely ill. I was so sick, I probably should have been in an ER. I sat down next to her and croaked, would you like to ask a question? Because if you ask a question, I get to talk, and I love to talk. And she turned and said, why are people wearing those gold things? And I said, well, the ones on their head or the ones on their belt. Thank God she wanted the ones on the head, because I had no idea what the belt thing was. But I spent most of the rest of the day, clear up till feast, talking to her, explaining things, telling her funny stories, singing her songs. I will sing until forcibly prevented. I have some wealthy friends who have offered to have a shirt made that says that, just to warn the rest of the world. And it was fun for me because I was not concentrating on how incredibly sore and sick I was. And she was no longer terrified because somebody was talking to her and not calling her stupid. Well, just over a year later, the prince and princess are sitting at the king and queen when they open and tally the recommendations for the various orders. And the queen says, oh my God, she actually got more points this time. Geez, am I going to have to give her a laurel? And the princess took one look at the name and said, no one gives that woman a grudging laurel. We will do it.
Ah.
It was the same girl.
Oh, my word.
Yeah. I didn't get my laurel for the clothier's arts because, frankly, that year I had spent too sick to breathe straight. I wasn't doing the clothier's arts. I wasn't doing anything except trying to figure out a way to hire a third world peasant to breathe for me. Hey, I should have been able to make this work. They needed the money. I could have used the help. Why not? But even though I was no longer capable of doing that work, or at least temporarily not capable of doing that work, it didn't matter. I got my laurel because I was kind.
There is a line in one of my favorite songs that says, and you never know who's watching or how far the story goes.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. Yeah. Should I tell you some stories about the things that went wrong? Aside from what happened to the quail, because that was just
Oh, the
seriously,
poor little
people.
birds.
Yeah, my friend brought them up from Florida, and by the time they got to Penzic, they were very thoroughly thawed, and by the time their night came around, no, go buy something at the Cooper store. Anyway, we had a couple who wanted to compete and signed up and went back to their barony's encampment. They were camping in singles camping because they were grass green new and knew no one in their barony, and asked if they could use the kitchen to cook in for this contest. And the barony basically told them, go away, little girl, you bother me. And they came back to tell us they couldn't do it. And I said, I have a stove, I have pans, I have dishes, do it here. And they tormented me for a night and a day cooking stuff that smelled absolutely glorious behind my booth, and I couldn't taste any of it or eat any of it because it wasn't time for the contest. Yes, yeah, yes, they won. They won handily. And then, of course, they have to choose their prize. So out of the shelf full of prizes, they had to choose things they could fit in backpacks because they were going home at 18 hours on a bus.
Mm.
There was the year that somebody said, oh, Old World spices are okay. And they went to Auntie Arwen's, which has over 4,000 different spices and spice blends, and went through the place like Sherman through Georgia. The only thing that wasn't spiced till hell wouldn't have it was the water. And since that was only one of 3 drinks they served, there was the charming elderly couple. If they were under 80, I would be astounded to be told so. She was basically tiny and bird frail, and he looked like, you know, nothing left but whipcord and steel. And they said, oh, we used to cook for picnics at the Southern Baptist Academy back when we were theology teachers. And I'm going, so you know 500 different congealed salad recipes. This ought to be interesting. And yeah, they probably did. But they also had an entire kingdom that thought that the entire kingdom's duty at Penzic was to keep them safe, healthy, and happy. Because, you know, you've got people in your kingdom that are 3 weeks older than God. You want to take good care of them so that you don't have to go to a funeral at Penzic. So they not only got loaned every cookbook in camp, including quite a few that probably got scuffed up a little on the way back from the merchants area. Oh yeah, this old thing, I've had it forever. Then why aren't any of the pages open? But they didn't win. They took second, but they were so tickled. They were beaming the whole time, and they congratulated the winners elaborately and asked if they could taste things. And of course we said yes. And they were practically walking on air as they went back to camp. We came in and we got a silver platter. Hey, you like silver platters? You've got a silver platter. Thank you for entering. And the king's looking at the guys that had come up with them to make absolutely certain nothing fell off anything on the way to the contest. Like, you ready to carry them if they need it, right? You already know that that's what's going to happen if they need it, right?
Okay, well, we're coming up on 3 o'clock, so we probably
Okay.
should leave this room to the quince marmalade, is it, ladies and
Yeah.
gents?
Yeah.
So, thank you very much for being here.
Oh,
This
you are
has-
very welcome. I had fun. Unfortunately, my phone is about to die because my son stole my cord. That was why I went off screen at the very beginning of the class for a moment.
Mhm.